Hey, David, the vaccine has arrived, hasn't it?
No, it's in the freezers, John, and the feds are keeping half, and the states are keeping half, and very little is getting into the upper arm.
What?
Welcome to CareTalk, your vacation home for incisive debate about healthcare business and policy. I'm David Williams, president of Health Business Group.
And I'm John Driscoll, the CEO of CareCentrix.
So, John, Merry Christmas. The Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are both approved. They're just sealed up and wrapped in a nice gift wrap. How's everything going?
Good news, David. Good news, but it only is good news if it gets distributed wisely. How do you think that's going? How's the distribution of the vaccines going?
Well, John, we sort of fooled ourselves before with this sort of red herring, which was the cold chain problem, all the freezers that we needed. We talked about that before, the deep freeze. And it turns out that's actually not the real problem that seems to be getting around in the freezers. But a lot of the doses are just sitting in the freezers, John. They need to free the doses from the freezers.
Free the doses. I like that. Yeah, I must admit, I was a skeptic that we would be able to exploit the technology we have to get a vaccine that was so effective. Now we've got two exploiting this RMNA technology that's just remarkable. And the results from the clinical trials are really outstanding. And now that we've got this technology available, it's sort of amazing that we're bungling the distribution. I mean, just last week, General Perna took personal responsibility for the explanation of the distribution. But I actually think some structural flaws with the plan. I mean, it's great to see those boxes going out the door, but we are at uh, you know, peak vulnerability as a society with the post Thanksgiving, post holiday surges. I think we had some of the most devastating, deadly days in sort of COVID time of our experience. And David, what can we do about this?
So, John, let me try to underline this point because it's actually a major one. I think it's possible that we always knew there was going to be supply constraints. We wouldn't have enough. But I think we may only be using about 25% of the doses that we actually have, John.
I don't believe that. I thought I was upset at 50%, but but how do you get to 20? So that would say that of the vaccines we have, only 1 in 4 is being put into people's arms.
So, John, here's what seems to be happening. So, the federal government is getting the vaccine and then they're distributing it. Now, they're not distributing all of it. They're only distributing 45% of what they get. The reason is they're taking, 50% of it and keeping that because they want to use that for the second dose. And then they have another 5% for the safety stock, which they have now. They're sending out the 50% or 45%. And then some of the states, and this is happening in Massachusetts, they're only releasing a certain portion of it because they want to have enough for the second dose. So what's happening is this is like D-Day, when this was written up in the Washington Post. Imagine you say, well, we know we're going to need more bullets, so let's hold them back now. No, what you want to do is use them all now, and then there's more that are coming, and you wait and you use those. You use those for the second dose.
Actually, D-Day is the wrong example, David. It's more like if you were being attacked at Pearl Harbor and the ships were sinking. Do you say, well, you know what? Let's hold back on some of that ammunition because we got people dying next to us. But you know what? Maybe the Japanese attackers have more. No, it's ridiculous. I think that what's extraordinary to me is this incredible bet the federal government made on Operation Warp Speed. The Trump administration has done a remarkable job at catalyzing with the private sector a revolutionary advance in a vaccine that can directly help us. I mean, David, I think that the results of there's no question we've only measured fully the clinical results of 2 doses. But I recall that the effect of just 1 dose on the Moderna side had potentially up to 80% efficacy. It's not above that high 90s efficacy. And we bet on industry and government wants to produce for us, and they have. And it seems like by holding back that second wave of doses, we're betting against our own ability to solve the problem. I just that baffles me.
Well, John, so first of all, um, with the 2 doses, even if you are planning to give 2 doses, and that's the current plan, you still shouldn't hold back because they're manufacturing more. And if there's supply chain problems, they can't manufacture it. We've got even worse problems. So you should just go ahead and do it. But you're right, John. With most vaccines that need 2 doses, like the measles vaccine, if you just get 1 dose, you get something like 90% of the way there. Now, this is a new technology. It's possible that won't hold in this case, but remember, we're in an emergency, and the early data from the clinical trials, actually both Moderna and Pfizer, demonstrate that you've got 80 or 90% of the eventual efficacy from 1 dose. And they're talking about, well, maybe we should do a trial, maybe we shouldn't. Pfizer's not planning to. One reason is because it would cut the size of the market in half if it worked. But you don't need to do a clinical trial. You can use real world evidence from what's happening out there and see what occurs right now.
I just think we have to bet on ourselves. I mean, the other thing to think about this is a substantially seasonally affected disease. We are at peak time now. Some estimates, I think the IMHE, one of the leading planning groups, thinks that the infection rate and death rate will peak in the January to February period, tail off into the spring and summer, may come back in the fall, but by then we'll be substantially better prepared. But if this is the peak time of being attacked by the virus, why we wouldn't bet on ourselves to expand the production to the point where we have as many vaccines in people's arms. I mean, as I recall these numbers, Dave, I think they're right. 52,000 nursing home residents are getting COVID a week. Roughly 1 in 5, 21% plus, are likely to die. So that would put us at roughly 40,000 deaths. If you look at the difference between actually bringing vaccinating as many of those residents as we can versus waiting for the perfect plan. It just doesn't make sense. It feels like in America, we are trading the certain risk, a probability of us with the infection rates we're at right now of vulnerable population, deaths at a higher rate, versus the uncertain but potentially manageable risk that we won't be able to bring manufacturing online. I think we need to bet on ourselves. The way I understand it, David, the feds are only releasing the first dose when they've got the second dose available. To your point about firing the ammunition we've got, I think we should be shipping as many vaccines as we can to the states and getting them into the frontline workers and nursing home and vulnerable people as quickly as possible. And bet on ourselves. We've proven that we can.
John, we like to talk about data and international comparisons on this show. There is a site maintained by Oxford University called ourworldindata.org. And if you go there, you can see the number of vaccinations that have been given out for COVID-19 in different countries, and they have it rated per 100 people. So in the United States, as of December 26, it's 0.59 per 100. In other words, about 0.5% of people. In Israel, which is the leader, it's 4.37 as of December 27th. So even accounting for the other day, it's something like 7 times, more than 7 times the difference. Now, what are they doing there? They're actually treating it as a civil defense emergency. They have their equivalent of the Red Cross. They have military that are helping, and they're doing 24/7 if they need to. All of the nursing homes are going to be vaccinated by next week, all done. And they're ready to go, and they're ready if they have allergic reactions with the EpiPen. And they're just on it. And this is using the same vaccine that we have here. So why can't we do that?
No, I totally agree. I think it's bad decision making at the center. We should be trying to think about it. If the greatest number of vulnerable people are likely to get sick and die now, we should be using the vaccines that we know can work. And this is not about communicating the problem. I mean, 14 governors complained about the federal government explaining how many doses it would have. And there will be communications challenges for sure. This is about being overly conservative when we are certainly at risk. I just don't think it makes sense. But let's get into the communication, David, in terms of who's getting and should get the vaccine. The feds put out some somewhat complicated guidelines. What did you think of those? And do you think that they're going to add to the confidence of people that they're going to get the vaccine in time, or just make it even more complicated?
Well, John, as long as we're trashing everything, let's continue with this one. So I thought, everybody wants to be in group one, right? It's kind of like when you remember when we used to go to the airport back in the olden days, and they'd say, okay, you got something on your on your ticket, and it says boarding group one, and so I'm gonna be the first one. But then there's global services, first class, all your buddies, John, and then group one is like the 10th group. So they have group one, but it's really group 1A, group 1B, and group 1C. And by the time you
It sounds like American Airlines.
yeah, and by the time you get to Group 1C, it's over 200 million people out of a population of 328 million, and it's probably even more of the eligible population because kids under 16 are not included. So what's happened, John, is that even in this Group 1A, which is the frontline medical staff and long-term care residents, there's been problems. I'm going to tell you a problem I read about. It was in the New York Times, and they were talking about New York Presbyterian, famous hospital. And what happened was some employees got access to the vaccine, even though they were in low risk categories. And they just found out that, oh, hey, Jay, we got some vaccine. Let's go and pop it in, which the CEO was sad about. The other thing that's happening, I also heard this from a source in New York State, is that uh, they decided, first of all, New York had this thing where they had 5 different categories that were different from the CDC one. Then they aligned it. And so this group 1A, they said, even within that, let's prioritize the inpatient providers, which sounds good, right? Because they're dealing with the COVID patients. Except when you're an inpatient, then that's actually where you've got the PPE in place, personal protective equipment. Whereas when you're dealing with these patients on an outpatient basis, it's more like the Wild West. You're kind of on your own. And so those providers are feeling that they are not being valued. So we've got to remember, John, a ton of stress also in the healthcare system. They just, when people have been out there saying this is a hoax and so on, they've actually just been bombarded with patients, and people are reaching their breaking point.
Well, I think again that speaks to one dose is the way. One dose is the way. We will. I think we can bet on our manufacturing to ramp up. People shouldn't forget that there are probably 100 other vaccines in production. The most promising one currently that I think in line is the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine that had a little bit of a sidestep in its clinical protocols, but does not require a cold chain and is much more easily and more flexibly manufactured. I actually think that the CDC was trying to give the states a lot of flexibility. Ultimately, we are a 50-state regime, regardless of whether we like it or not, and the states are going to handle it the way the states are going to handle it. I hear there are even more challenges in the center of your universe, the People's Republic of Massachusetts. You talk a little bit about how they are not just doing 50, but less than 50, and then actually it's around 45% of the vaccines. I mean, can you explain to me what's going on in Massachusetts?
Well, John, no, but I do hear that what happened is they had an app like at Mass General Hospital, that wasn't working, and as a result, people didn't get their doses. What I was thinking, John, it would be sort of like, like you're sort of like hanging around at the end of the day, and it's like, hey, anybody have a few extra doses? Like in when they mark down food at the supermarket when it's about to go bad, you could probably just like hang around and go and get a vaccine, even a healthy youngster such as yourself, John. So that would be the upside of it. So, John, on a positive note here, let's look ahead to the new year. So, there's a couple things that are going to happen. One is the Biden administration is gonna come in, and maybe you have some insight into how the transition is going as it relates to the COVID-19 planning. And then the other thing is that as more doses are available, maybe it's going to be in the hands of those that are better at logistics, people like Walmart and CVS and so on. So, do you see any kind of hope in that direction?
No, I actually think the pharmacies have been intimately involved. Walmart, Walgreens, CVS are very engaged, and they do have the infrastructure to really be an extension of the arms and legs of the public health authority to actually make sure initially vulnerable populations, particularly in nursing homes, have access to the vaccines. And I think they're pretty well organized, and we've got a huge retail store infrastructure with lots of pharmacists that are probably underutilized from a clinical perspective. Actually, that's really good news, but we have to flood the supply when we're being attacked by the virus. That's the biggest challenge. And I think the vagueness and the uncertainty in the distribution is again being hamstrung by the bureaucrats who are letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. The perfect being having knowing absolutely that you've got a second dose, knowing absolutely that you've even got support for any breakdowns in supply or anything that goes bad, as opposed to just betting on our own distribution and infrastructure. Look, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty here. The anti-vaxxers and all of that. I think we need to be leaning into the technology that works and bet on ourselves for production. And I bet we have the infrastructure to vaccinate the vast majority of the country to break the back of this by the spring, and certainly by the summer, with enough people getting that critical and very effective vaccine. And I think the Biden administration's big advantage is they believe in government, a government that works, and they're going to try to make it work and partner with the states, Republican or Democrat, to actually deliver on breaking the back of this crisis, leveraging the vaccine and also the therapeutics that aren't being utilized as effectively. The problem with an administration that really doesn't believe in government is that when it then needs to use government, it's already undermined the confidence in those governing bodies to do their work, and probably made it much harder to do. I think in general we're moving in the right direction. We just have to expand faster at what we're doing right.
Well, John, we may not have the Israel Defense Forces here, but we do have Walmart, and I think that should be a real shot on the arm in 2021, especially as the Biden administration comes in.
I'm betting on Walmart.
So let's wrap it up, John, for this episode, and in fact, this year of CareTalk, which has been quite a year, John, with millions of downloads and many adoring fans that would be probably rushing us and pulling our hair out if it weren't for the pandemic.
You don't have hair.
In any case, that's it. I'm David Williams, president of Health Business Group.
And I'm John Driscoll, the CEO of CareCentrix. Thanks for listening.